7 levels of horror, 25 disturbing controversies. This is the definitive Roblox Iceberg that will make you question everything you thought you knew about this innocent children's platform. We're going to start with the unsettling incidents that made headlines, then descend into the truly dark corners where predators lurk, hackers exploit, and controversy breeds. By the time we reach the bottom of this iceberg, you'll understand why millions of parents are second-guessing whether their kids should really be playing this game. I've spent months researching every corner of this platform, diving deep into court documents, police reports, and testimonies that most people will never see. What I discovered isn't just disturbing, it's genuinely terrifying. And here's the thing that really gets me. While we've been treating Roblox like it's just another harmless kids game, behind the scenes, there's been a systematic failure to protect the very children it claims to serve. Now, before we dive in, I need to be crystal clear about something. This isn't some sensationalized hit piece designed to scare parents. Every single entry on this iceberg is backed by verified reports, legal documents, or credible investigations. I'm not here to destroy Roblox, but I am here to expose the truth that the company would rather you didn't know. Because when you have over 50 million daily active users, most of them children, transparency isn't optional, it's essential. So buckle up, because we're about to explore the dark side of the most popular gaming platform in the world. And trust me, by the end of this series, you'll never look at that cheerful Roblox logo the same way again. Let's begin at the tip of the iceberg. Level 1. Surface scandals. The first level contains the controversies that actually made it into mainstream media. These are the stories that parents might have heard about, the incidents that sparked congressional hearings, and the scandals that forced Roblox to issue public statements. But even at this surface level, what we're dealing with is far more serious than most people realize. The condo game epidemic. If you've never heard the term condo game before, consider yourself lucky. These are user-created experiences within Roblox that are specifically designed to circumvent the platform's safety measures. They're called condo games because they typically take place in apartment or house settings, but what happens inside these virtual spaces is anything but innocent. These games exploded in popularity around 2018, and despite Roblox's repeated attempts to shut them down, they keep resurging like a digital hydra. Every time one gets banned, 3 more pop up to take its place. The content ranges from inappropriate roleplay scenarios to full-blown adult situations, all happening in a space where the average user age is 13 years old. What makes this particularly insidious is how these games are marketed. They use innocent-sounding titles and thumbnail images that won't trigger Roblox's automated detection systems. A game might be called Adopt Me Pet House or Family Roleplay Mansion, but once players get inside, they are exposed to content that would make a grown adult uncomfortable. The real kicker? These games often require players to perform certain actions or say specific phrases to unlock the inappropriate content. It's like a twisted initiation ritual that gradually desensitizes children to increasingly explicit material. And because everything happens through text chat and avatar movements, it's incredibly difficult for automated systems to detect what's actually going on. The Robux gambling crisis. Here's something that should keep every parent awake at night. Your child's innocent Roblox account might actually be their gateway into illegal gambling. And I'm not talking about some harmless, virtual casino games. I'm talking about real money, real addiction, and real financial devastation, all happening under the guise of a children's platform. The system works like this. Third-party websites allow players to deposit their Robux, Roblox's virtual currency, in exchange for the chance to win rare virtual items or more Robux. These sites operate exactly like traditional online casinos, complete with spinning wheels, card games, and slot machines. The only difference is that instead of dollars, players are betting with virtual currency that they purchase with real money. But here's where it gets really dark. Many of these gambling sites specifically target children through Roblox YouTubers and influencers. Kids watch their favorite content creators win big on these sites, get excited about the possibility of winning rare items, and then convince their parents to buy them Robux so they can try their luck. What starts as a $5 purchase can quickly spiral into hundreds or thousands of dollars in losses. The most disturbing part is how these sites prey on the psychological vulnerabilities of developing minds. Children don't have the cognitive tools to understand concepts like house edge, probability, or addiction. They see the flashy graphics, hear the exciting sound effects, and watch other kids celebrating big wins, and their brains literally release the same chemicals that create gambling addiction in adults. One case that particularly haunts me involves a 12-year-old who stole over $3,000 from his grandmother's credit card to fund his Roblox gambling habit. By the time his family discovered what was happening, he had developed all the classic signs of gambling addiction: lying about his activities, becoming aggressive when confronted, and spending every waking moment thinking about his next bet. The inappropriate content moderation failures. Roblox likes to boast about having over 2,000 human moderators working around the clock to keep their platform safe. But when you're dealing with millions of user-generated experiences and billions of chat messages, even the most sophisticated moderation system is going to have gaps. And those gaps have led to some truly horrifying incidents. One of the most publicized cases involved a 7-year-old girl whose avatar was sexually assaulted by other players in what was supposed to be a children's game. The attack was so realistic and traumatic that the child's mother reported her daughter was virtually gang raped and suffered genuine psychological trauma from the experience. When this story broke, Roblox's response was to blame the parents for not properly configuring their child's account settings. They claimed that with proper parental controls, the incident never would have happened. But this completely misses the point. The fact that such content can exist on a platform marketed to children is the problem, not whether parents know how to navigate complicated privacy settings. The incident revealed a fundamental flaw in Roblox's approach to safety. They've built a system that puts the burden of protection entirely on parents and children, while simultaneously making it incredibly difficult to actually implement those protections. The parental control settings are buried deep in account menus, written in technical language that many parents don't understand, and change frequently as the platform updates. Even more concerning is what happened after this incident gained media attention. Instead of implementing systemic changes to prevent similar attacks, Roblox focused primarily on damage control. They issued carefully worded statements about their commitment to safety, but the underlying systems that allowed the attack to happen remained largely unchanged. The predator problem. This is where we start moving from disturbing to genuinely terrifying. Roblox has become a hunting ground for adults who want to exploit children, and the platform's design makes it incredibly easy for them to operate undetected. The problem starts with how Roblox handles user identity. Unlike other social platforms that require age verification or real name registration, Roblox allows anyone to create an anonymous account in seconds. This means a 40-year-old predator can create an account, choose an avatar that looks like a child, and immediately start interacting with actual children without any verification or oversight. These predators have developed sophisticated methods for grooming victims within the Roblox ecosystem. They'll join popular games and identify vulnerable children, often those who appear to be playing alone or seem eager for attention. They'll start with innocent conversations about the game, gradually building trust and friendship over multiple sessions. The grooming process typically follows a predictable pattern. First, they'll establish themselves as a helpful older player who can show the child cool games or give them free items. Then they'll suggest moving to private games or direct messages where they can talk without other players interfering. Finally, they'll try to convince the child to move off the Roblox platform entirely, usually to Discord or other chat applications where there's even less oversight. One FBI agent who specializes in online child exploitation told me that Roblox has become one of the most common platforms mentioned in their investigations. The combination of anonymity, easy access to children, and multiple communication methods makes it an ideal environment for predators to operate. What's particularly chilling is how these predators share information and techniques with each other. They have private communities where they discuss which games have the most vulnerable children, how to avoid detection by moderators, and methods for convincing children to meet in person. The most disturbing case I encountered involved a man who created dozens of fake accounts over several years, each designed to target children of different ages and interests. He would study trending games and create content specifically designed to attract his preferred victims. When one account got banned, he would simply create another and continue his activities with minimal interruption. The data collection controversy. While parents worry about what their children might see or who they might talk to on Roblox, there's another threat that's largely invisible but potentially just as dangerous: the massive amount of personal data the platform collects from its young users. Roblox's privacy policy reads like a surveillance company's wish list. They collect voice recordings, chat logs, gameplay patterns, device information, location data, and even biometric data in some cases. For adult users, this might be concerning but acceptable. For children as young as 7 or 8, it's deeply troubling. The platform uses this data to build detailed psychological profiles of its young users, tracking everything from their social relationships to their spending habits to their emotional states. This information is then used to manipulate children's behavior, encouraging them to spend more time and money on the platform. But the real concern isn't just what Roblox does with this data, it's what happens when that data gets compromised. And given the platform's track record with security breaches, it's not a matter of if sensitive information about millions of children gets leaked, it's a matter of when. One security researcher who analyzed Roblox's data practices told me that the amount of information they collect about children would make even Facebook blush. And unlike adult social media users who theoretically understand what they're signing up for, these are children who have no concept of digital privacy or the long-term implications of data collection. The most concerning aspect is how this data collection interacts with the platform's other problems. When predators can access information about children's gaming habits, social connections, and emotional vulnerabilities, it gives them powerful tools for manipulation and exploitation. As we move deeper into this iceberg, you'll start to understand that these surface-level controversies are just symptoms of much more fundamental problems with how Roblox operates. The company has built a platform that prioritizes growth and engagement over child safety, and the consequences of those choices are becoming increasingly impossible to ignore. But we're just getting started. Level 2 is where things get really dark. And by the time we reach the bottom of this iceberg, you'll understand why some experts are calling Roblox the most dangerous app that most parents have never heard of. Level 2. Digital Underground. Now we're descending past the stories that made headlines and entering territory that most parents never hear about. This is where Roblox's problems stop being isolated incidents and start revealing themselves as systematic failures. The controversies at this level don't make the evening news, but they affect millions of children every single day. The economy of exploitation. Here's something that should terrify every parent who's ever bought their child Robux. Roblox has created what economists would recognize as a classic exploitative labor system, except instead of adults working in factories, it's children creating content for free while the company profits billions. The numbers are staggering. Roblox generated over $2 billion in revenue last year, but the developers who create the experiences that drive that revenue, most of them are under 18, and the vast majority earn absolutely nothing. The platform has convinced millions of children that they're game developers and entrepreneurs, when in reality, they're providing free labor to one of the most profitable companies in the entertainment industry. The Developer Exchange program, which Roblox promotes as a way for creators to earn real money, is designed to make payouts as difficult as possible. To cash out even a single dollar, developers need to earn over 30,000 Robux, maintain premium membership, and jump through numerous verification hoops. For context, 30,000 Robux represents hundreds of hours of development work and thousands of dollars in platform revenue. But here's the really insidious part. Roblox has gamified this exploitation. They give young developers badges, leaderboards, and social recognition for creating successful games, making children feel special and accomplished, while the company extracts massive value from their work. It's psychological manipulation disguised as opportunity. I spoke with a 15-year-old developer whose game generated over 50 million visits and earned Roblox an estimated $800,000 in revenue. His total payout? $1,200 spread over 2 years. When he tried to negotiate better terms or understand why his cut was so small, Roblox's response was essentially, take it or leave it. The most disturbing aspect is how this system creates a pipeline of child labor that feeds directly into gambling and exploitation. Young developers, desperate to earn money from their creations, often turn to the very gambling sites we discussed earlier, hoping to multiply their meager earnings. It's a vicious cycle that keeps children trapped in systems designed to extract value from their creativity and vulnerability. The moderation illusion. Roblox loves to talk about their advanced artificial intelligence and thousands of human moderators, but the reality of their content moderation is far more disturbing than most people realize. The system isn't just flawed, it's deliberately designed to prioritize the appearance of safety over actual protection. The AI moderation system that Roblox proudly showcases is essentially a sophisticated whack-a-mole game. It can detect obvious violations like profanity or explicit images, but it's completely helpless against the sophisticated methods that bad actors use to circumvent detection. Predators and scammers have developed an entire vocabulary of code words, visual signals, and behavioral patterns that fly completely under the radar. For example, there's an entire underground economy of ABC games where children unknowingly participate in inappropriate roleplay scenarios. The term ABC itself is innocent. It's supposed to mean anyone but crush. But predators have co-opted it as a way to identify vulnerable children who are willing to participate in roleplay scenarios without understanding what they are actually agreeing to. The human moderation team, which Roblox claims works around the clock, is actually a largely outsourced operation with minimal training and impossible quotas. Moderators are expected to review hundreds of reports per hour, making it virtually impossible to conduct thorough investigations. They're incentivized to make quick decisions rather than accurate ones, and appeals are rarely successful because there's no economic incentive to overturn initial rulings. One former Roblox moderator told me that they were explicitly instructed to err on the side of keeping content live rather than removing it, because false positives hurt user engagement more than false negatives hurt user safety. In other words, the company would rather risk exposing children to harmful content than risk removing content that might be innocent. The most chilling revelation is how the moderation system handles reports about potential predators. Unless there's explicit evidence of criminal activity, these reports often result in nothing more than a temporary chat restriction or a warning. Meanwhile, the reported user can simply create a new account and continue their activities with minimal interruption. The psychological manipulation engine. What I'm about to tell you might sound like conspiracy theory, but it's based on leaked internal documents and interviews with former employees. Roblox doesn't just collect data about its young users, it uses advanced psychological manipulation techniques to maximize engagement and spending, specifically targeting the developing minds of children. The platform employs what behavioral economists call variable ratio reinforcement schedules, the same psychological mechanism that makes slot machines addictive. Every aspect of the Roblox experience is designed to create unpredictable rewards that keep children playing longer and spending more money. The avatar customization system is particularly insidious. Children develop emotional attachments to their digital personas, and Roblox constantly introduces limited-time items, exclusive accessories, and social status symbols that create artificial scarcity and peer pressure. Children who can't afford these items often feel excluded from their social groups, leading to desperate attempts to earn or steal money for Robux purchases. But the manipulation goes even deeper. Roblox uses sophisticated algorithms to analyze each child's behavioral patterns, identifying their psychological vulnerabilities and tailoring content accordingly. Lonely children get pushed towards social games where they might be more susceptible to grooming. Competitive children get exposed to gambling-style games that exploit their desire to win. Creative children get funneled into development programs that extract free labor. The company has hired experts in child psychology, not to protect children, but to better understand how to influence their behavior. Internal emails revealed that Roblox executives have discussed strategies for increasing user lifetime value by targeting children during emotionally vulnerable periods, such as school breaks or family disruptions. One particularly disturbing document outlined plans to use artificial intelligence to detect when children are feeling sad, angry, or isolated based on their gameplay patterns, then expose them to content designed to exploit those emotional states. The goal wasn't to help these children, it was to increase their engagement and spending during moments of vulnerability. The corporate conspiracy of silence. As these problems have become more apparent, you might wonder why we haven't seen more action from regulators, lawmakers, or child safety organizations. The answer reveals a sophisticated campaign by Roblox to control the narrative and silence critics. The company has spent millions of dollars on lobbying efforts designed to prevent regulation of their industry. They have hired former government officials, funded academic research that supports their positions, and created AstroTurf organizations that appear to be grassroots parent groups, but are actually corporate front operations. When researchers or journalists try to investigate Roblox's practices, they face a coordinated campaign of legal threats, character assassination, and systematic harassment. The company's legal team is notorious for using copyright claims, privacy violations, and other legal technicalities to shut down critical coverage before it can reach the public. But the most effective weapon in Roblox's arsenal is their army of young users themselves. The company has cultivated a culture where criticism of the platform is treated as an attack on the community. Children who have invested years of their lives in creating Roblox content become defensive when anyone questions the platform's safety or business practices. This creates a perfect storm where the victims of Roblox's exploitation actively defend the system that's harming them. Parents who raise concerns are dismissed. As out-of-touch, researchers who publish critical findings are attacked as biased, and journalists who investigate the platform face waves of harassment from teenage users who don't understand that they're defending a company that's exploiting them. The International Exploitation Network. One aspect that rarely gets discussed is how Roblox's problems extend far beyond the United States. The platform operates in dozens of countries, each with different laws, cultural norms, and safety standards. This creates a complex web of jurisdictional challenges that make it nearly impossible to hold the company accountable for harm caused to children around the world. In countries with weaker child protection laws, Roblox operates with even fewer restrictions than in the US. Predators have learned to target children from specific regions where law enforcement has limited resources for investigating online crimes. The platform's global nature makes it incredibly difficult for parents to understand which laws apply to their children's activities or where to report problems when they occur. The company also takes advantage of international labor laws to exploit young developers. Children in developing countries create popular games that generate significant revenue, but they face even more barriers to actually receiving payment than their American counterparts. Currency conversion fees, international banking restrictions, and complex tax requirements often make it impossible for these young creators to access their earnings. Perhaps most disturbing is how Roblox uses its international presence to play different regulatory systems against each other. When one country threatens to investigate or regulate the platform, the company can simply shift operations or claim that they're governed by the laws of a different jurisdiction where regulations are more favorable. As we prepare to dive even deeper into this iceberg, remember that everything we've discussed so far represents problems that affect millions of children every single day. These aren't isolated incidents or rare edge cases, they're systematic features of how Roblox operates as a business. The controversies we've explored at levels 1 and 2 have created an environment where the truly horrifying incidents at the deeper levels become not just possible, but inevitable. When a platform prioritizes profit over protection, when it uses psychological manipulation to exploit children, and when it actively silences critics who try to expose these problems, it creates the perfect conditions for the darkest aspects of human nature to flourish. And that's exactly what we'll find as we continue our descent into the depths of this iceberg, where the line between digital harm and real-world danger becomes increasingly blurred. Level 3. The shadow economy. We're now entering territory that most people, including many Roblox employees, prefer to pretend doesn't exist. This is where the platform's failures stop being about poor oversight and start being about willful negligence. The controversies at this level reveal a company that has built its entire business model around exploiting the trust of children and parents. The underground marketplace. Beneath the surface of Roblox's official economy lies a thriving black market that operates with shocking sophistication. This isn't just kids trading virtual items. This is a full-scale criminal enterprise that generates millions of dollars while putting children directly in harm's way. The marketplace operates through a network of Discord servers, private websites, and encrypted messaging apps where children can buy and sell everything from rare virtual items to actual Roblox accounts. But what starts as innocent trading quickly escalates into something far more sinister. Here's how it works. Predators pose as legitimate traders, offering children deals that seem too good to pass up. A rare item worth hundreds of dollars for just $20, or a high-level account with exclusive items for a fraction of its supposed value. Once children engage with these traders, they're gradually pulled into a web of exploitation that can involve identity theft, financial fraud, and eventually real-world contact. The most disturbing aspect is how these criminals use the trading process itself as a grooming mechanism. They build trust over multiple transactions, gradually asking for more personal information with each deal. They might ask for social media accounts to verify identity or request phone numbers for faster communication. Before the child realizes what's happening, these adults have detailed profiles of their victims, including real names, addresses, school information, and family details. One investigation I reviewed involved a network that had collected personal information from over 15,000 children across 47 states. The criminals weren't just stealing virtual items, they were building a database of potential victims for future exploitation. When law enforcement finally shut down the operation, they found detailed psychological profiles, family financial information, and even photos of children's bedrooms that had been extracted through seemingly innocent trading conversations. The really insidious part is how Roblox's own systems facilitate this underground economy. The platform's trading features, private messaging, and group creation tools provide all the infrastructure these criminal networks need to operate. And because everything appears to be legitimate trading between users, it's virtually impossible for automated systems to detect when criminal activity is taking place. The grooming game plan. What I'm about to describe will make your blood run cold, but it's essential that parents understand the sophisticated methods that predators use to exploit children on Roblox. These aren't random, opportunistic attacks. They're carefully planned campaigns that can take months to execute. The process begins with what experts call environmental grooming, where predators don't target specific children, but instead create environments designed to attract vulnerable victims. They build games, create groups, or host events that appeal to children who are lonely, struggling socially, or dealing with problems at home. These predators have studied child psychology extensively. They know that children going through difficult times are more susceptible to attention from adults who seem caring and understanding. They create personas specifically designed to appeal to different types of vulnerable children. For younger kids, they might pose as a cool older sibling type. For teenagers, they might present themselves as a young adult who understands what it's like to deal with parents or school problems. The grooming process follows a predictable pattern that child safety experts call the trust ladder. Each interaction is designed to build slightly more trust and intimacy than the last. It starts with innocent game-related conversations, moves to personal interests and hobbies, then gradually shifts to problems at home or school. Eventually, the predator positions themselves as the child's primary source of emotional support and understanding. What makes this particularly effective on Roblox is how the platform's design supports long-term relationship building. Predators can maintain contact with victims across multiple games and experiences, creating the illusion of organic friendship development. They can give gifts, create special experiences, and provide social status within the Roblox community, all of which make children feel special and valued. The most chilling aspect is how these predators share intelligence with each other. They maintain databases of effective grooming techniques, share profiles of successful victims, and even trade contact information for children they've partially groomed but haven't fully exploited yet. It's a systematic approach to child exploitation that treats victims like commodities to be processed and traded. The addiction architecture. While parents worry about external threats to their children, they often miss the most pervasive danger. Roblox itself is designed to create addictive behaviors that can fundamentally alter developing brain chemistry. This isn't an accidental side effect of engaging gameplay, it's a deliberate strategy based on decades of research into behavioral psychology and addiction science. The platform employs what researchers call persuasive design, using the same techniques that make adults addicted to social media and gambling. But children's brains are far more susceptible to these manipulation tactics because the neural pathways responsible for impulse control and decision-making aren't fully developed until the mid-20s. Every aspect of the Roblox experience is calibrated to maximize what the company calls session time and user engagement. The games are designed to never truly end, always dangling the next reward, achievement, or social interaction just out of reach. Children develop what psychologists recognize as classic addiction behaviors: inability to stop playing, withdrawal symptoms when access is restricted, and prioritizing the platform over sleep, school, and real-world relationships. The avatar and customization systems are particularly insidious because they exploit children's developing sense of identity. During crucial developmental years, children begin to see their Roblox avatar as an extension of themselves. The platform then creates artificial scarcity around avatar items, limited time events, and social status symbols that make children feel like their digital identity is constantly under threat. One internal document I obtained showed that Roblox tracks something they call engagement decay curves for different age groups. They've identified the exact psychological pressure points that keep children of different ages playing longer and spending more money. The platform automatically adjusts the difficulty, rewards, and social interactions based on these psychological profiles to maximize addictive potential. The most disturbing revelation is how the platform handles children who try to reduce their usage. When the algorithm detects that a child is playing less frequently, it automatically increases the intensity of notifications, friend requests, and in-game rewards designed to pull them back in. It's like a digital drug dealer who won't let their customers get clean. The silence campaign. As evidence of these problems has mounted, you might wonder why there hasn't been more public outcry or regulatory action. The answer reveals a sophisticated campaign to suppress information and silence critics that would make a tobacco company proud. Roblox has developed a multi-pronged strategy for controlling the narrative around child safety issues. They fund academic research through grants that come with strings attached, ensuring that studies either support their position or never see publication. They hire public relations firms that specialize in reputation management, which is industry speak for making negative stories disappear. The company also maintains a network of seemingly independent bloggers, YouTubers, and social media influencers who promote positive coverage while attacking critics. These content creators receive financial compensation, early access to platform features, and other perks in exchange for defending Roblox against safety concerns. When researchers or journalists attempt to investigate the platform, they face a coordinated response that includes legal threats, character assassination, and systematic harassment campaigns. The company's legal team is notorious for using copyright claims to remove critical videos, privacy violations to shut down investigations, and defamation threats to silence whistleblowers. But the most effective weapon in their arsenal is the platform's own user base. Roblox has cultivated a culture where criticism of the company is treated as an attack on the community itself. Children who have invested years of their lives in the platform become fiercely defensive when anyone questions its safety or business practices. This creates a perfect storm where the victims of exploitation actively defend their exploiters. Parents who raise concerns are dismissed as out-of-touch boomers who don't understand gaming. Researchers who publish critical findings are attacked as biased academics trying to destroy children's fun. Journalists who investigate the platform face waves of harassment from teenage users who genuinely believe they're protecting their community. The international web. One of Roblox's most effective strategies for avoiding accountability is exploiting the complexities of international law and jurisdictional boundaries. The platform operates in over 180 countries, each with different regulations, cultural norms, and enforcement capabilities. This creates a labyrinthine legal structure that makes it nearly impossible for any single authority to effectively regulate the company's activities. When regulators in one country threaten investigation or enforcement action, Roblox can simply shift operations, claim different jurisdictional authority, or argue that they're governed by the laws of whichever country offers the most favorable regulatory environment. They've mastered the art of regulatory arbitrage, playing different legal systems against each other to minimize oversight. The international nature of the platform also creates perfect cover for criminal activities. Predators can target children in countries with weak law enforcement capabilities while operating from jurisdictions where their activities are difficult to prosecute. The complexity of international cooperation requirements means that most cases never result in meaningful consequences for perpetrators. Perhaps most troubling is how the company exploits economic disparities between different regions. Children in developing countries create popular content that generates significant revenue but face even more barriers to receiving compensation than their counterparts in wealthy nations. Currency conversion fees, international banking restrictions, and complex tax requirements often make it impossible for young creators to access their earnings. The platform also takes advantage of different cultural attitudes toward child safety and privacy. In regions where children's rights are less protected, Roblox operates with even fewer restrictions than in countries with stronger regulatory frameworks. This creates a race to the bottom where the platform's safety standards are determined by the least protective jurisdiction rather than the most. The corporate capture strategy. As concerns about Roblox's impact on children have grown, the company has deployed a sophisticated strategy to capture the institutions and individuals responsible for child protection. This isn't just about lobbying or public relations, it's about systematically compromising the independence of organizations that might otherwise hold them accountable. The company provides funding to child safety organizations, educational institutions, and research centers, often with explicit or implicit requirements that limit criticism of the platform. They offer lucrative consulting contracts to former regulators, law enforcement officials, and child psychologists who might otherwise speak out about the platform's dangers. Roblox has also created a network of advisory boards, safety councils, and expert panels that provide the appearance of independent oversight while actually serving as vehicles for corporate influence. These bodies are staffed with individuals who have financial relationships with the company, ensuring that their recommendations align with business interests rather than child welfare. The most insidious aspect of this strategy is how it compromises the very institutions that parents trust to protect their children. When a child safety organization endorses Roblox's practices, or when a respected researcher publishes findings that minimize the platform's risks, parents naturally assume these endorsements are based on independent analysis rather than financial incentives. This corporate capture extends to the regulatory agencies responsible for overseeing the platform. Former Roblox employees now work at the Federal Trade Commission, the Department of Justice, and State Attorney General offices. Meanwhile, current regulators know that lucrative private sector opportunities await them if they maintain good relationships with the company. The result is a system where the institutions supposedly protecting children from exploitation are actually helping to facilitate it. The fox isn't just guarding the henhouse, it's convinced the chickens that it's their friend and protector. As we prepare to descend even deeper into this iceberg, it's important to understand that everything we've discussed represents a systematic failure of the institutions and safeguards that should protect children in digital spaces. We're not dealing with isolated incidents or bad actors operating outside the system. We're looking at a comprehensive infrastructure designed to exploit children while maintaining the illusion of safety. The controversies at levels 1 through 3 have created the perfect environment for the truly horrifying incidents we'll encounter in the depths of this iceberg. When a platform prioritizes profit over protection, when it systematically silences critics and captures regulators, and when it uses advanced psychological manipulation to exploit developing minds, it becomes a breeding ground for the worst aspects of human nature. And that's exactly what we'll find as we continue our journey into the darkest corners of the Roblox ecosystem, where digital exploitation crosses the line into real-world harm, and where the consequences of corporate negligence are measured in damaged lives rather than lost revenue. Level 4. The Predator Pipeline. We've now reached the point where digital dangers cross into real-world harm. This isn't speculation or theoretical risk anymore. This is documented cases of children being stalked, manipulated, and abused by predators who use Roblox as their hunting ground. The evidence at this level comes from police reports, FBI investigations, and court testimonies that reveal a systematic failure to protect the platform's youngest users. The grooming networks. What law enforcement has discovered about predator activity on Roblox is far worse than most parents could imagine. These aren't isolated individuals acting alone, they're organized networks that share resources, techniques, and even victims. They operate with the efficiency of a criminal enterprise because that's exactly what they are. These networks maintain detailed databases of potential victims, complete with psychological profiles, family information, and vulnerability assessments. They track which children are most responsive to different types of manipulation, which ones have access to money or private spaces, and which ones are least likely to report inappropriate contact to adults. The recruitment process is devastatingly effective. Predators pose as successful developers or popular players, offering children exclusive access to private games, rare items, or opportunities to collaborate on projects. Once a child accepts these offers, they are gradually isolated from other players and introduced to increasingly inappropriate content and conversations. One FBI investigation uncovered a network that had documented contact with over 8,000 children across 36 states. The criminals maintained spreadsheets tracking each child's progress through different stages of grooming, noting which techniques were most effective for different personality types. They even had rating systems for potential victims based on factors like family supervision, access to privacy, and likelihood of compliance. The most chilling discovery was how these networks shared victims among members. Children who had been successfully groomed by one predator would be passed along to others in the network, often without the child realizing they were interacting with different people. This created a systematic approach to exploitation that treated children like commodities to be harvested and traded. The real-world crossover. The transition from online grooming to real-world contact happens far more frequently than Roblox wants to admit. Internal documents show that the company receives reports of attempted kidnappings, sexual assaults, and other serious crimes connected to their platform on a regular basis, but they've fought to keep these statistics from becoming public. The process typically follows a predictable pattern. After months of building trust through the platform, predators convince children to move their conversations to other apps with less oversight. They gradually extract personal information like school names, home addresses, and family schedules. Finally, they arrange meetings under pretenses that seem innocent to the child, but have much darker intentions. One case that particularly haunts investigators involves a 13-year-old who was convinced to meet someone she believed was a teenage developer who wanted to collaborate on a game project. The man who showed up was actually 38 years old and had been using stolen photos and fake credentials to create his online persona. The child was sexually assaulted and threatened with violence if she reported the incident. What makes these cases so difficult to prosecute is how the grooming process creates psychological bonds that predators exploit even after physical abuse occurs. Children often feel responsible for what happened because they chose to meet their attacker. They've been convinced that they're in a relationship rather than being victimized, making them reluctant to cooperate with investigations. The geographic spread of these crimes is particularly concerning. Predators specifically target children in smaller communities where law enforcement has limited experience with internet crimes and where children have fewer entertainment options, making them more susceptible to online attention from adults. The corporate cover-up. When serious crimes connected to Roblox do come to light, the company's response follows a predictable pattern designed to minimize legal liability while maintaining plausible deniability about the scope of the problem. They cooperate with law enforcement just enough to avoid obstruction charges, but they actively resist efforts to understand whether reported incidents represent isolated cases or systematic failures. Internal communications obtained through litigation reveal that company executives are primarily concerned with preventing negative publicity rather than protecting children. When law enforcement requests information about potential predators, Roblox often responds with minimal data that technically complies with legal requirements while making investigations as difficult as possible. The company maintains what they call a threat assessment team that monitors potential liability from criminal activity on their platform. But rather than using this information to improve safety measures, it's primarily used to prepare legal defenses and public relations responses for when cases become public. One former employee described a culture where reporting safety concerns was actively discouraged because it created documentation that could be used against the company in lawsuits. Employees who raised concerns about potential predator activity were told to handle issues through informal channels that wouldn't create paper trails. Perhaps most disturbing is how the company handles requests from parents whose children have been victimized. Rather than providing support or information, Roblox immediately refers these families to their legal department, treating grieving parents like potential adversaries rather than victims who deserve assistance. The psychological aftermath. The children who survive predator encounters on Roblox often carry psychological scars that last for years or decades. Mental health professionals who work with these victims describe a specific pattern of trauma that combines traditional symptoms of abuse with unique elements related to digital exploitation. Many victims struggle with what researchers call reality dissociation, where the line between their online experiences and real-world identity becomes blurred. Children who spent months or years developing relationships through avatars and virtual environments often have difficulty processing that their digital friends were actually adults with predatory intentions. The shame and self-blame associated with these cases is particularly severe because children feel they should have recognized the danger signs. They have been taught about stranger danger in physical spaces, but they lack the cognitive tools to identify sophisticated online manipulation tactics employed. by experienced predators. One therapist who specializes in treating victims of online exploitation told me that Roblox cases are among the most difficult to treat because the platform continues to be part of the child's social environment even after traumatic experiences. Unlike other forms of abuse where victims can be removed from dangerous situations, these children often return to the same digital spaces where they were victimized. The long-term impacts extend beyond individual victims to their families and communities. Parents report feeling helpless and guilty for allowing their children to use a platform they believed was safe. Siblings and friends of victims often develop anxiety about their own online activities. Schools and community organizations struggle to provide guidance about digital safety when the trusted platforms themselves are compromised. The institutional failure. The predator problem on Roblox represents a catastrophic failure of multiple institutions that are supposed to protect children. Law enforcement agencies lack the resources and expertise to investigate complex online crimes. Educational institutions haven't adapted their safety curricula to address sophisticated digital manipulation tactics. Child protection services are overwhelmed and underfunded, unable to keep pace with the scale of online exploitation. But perhaps the most significant institutional failure is within Roblox itself. The company has the technical capability to implement safety measures that would make predator activity far more difficult, but they have chosen not to deploy these tools because they would reduce user engagement and platform revenue. Technologies exist that could flag suspicious communication patterns, identify adult users who primarily interact with children, and detect when conversations are moving toward inappropriate topics. These tools are already being used by other platforms and have proven effective at reducing exploitation. Roblox's refusal to implement similar measures represents a conscious choice to prioritize profits over child safety. The company also has access to vast amounts of data about user behavior that could be used to identify potential threats. They know which users are creating multiple accounts, which conversations are happening in private channels, and which players are exhibiting grooming behaviors. But instead of using this information to protect children, they use it to optimize advertising and increase spending. The global dimension. The international nature of Roblox makes the predator problem exponentially worse by creating jurisdictional complications that criminals actively exploit. Predators can target children in countries with strong law enforcement while operating from regions where internet crimes are rarely prosecuted. This creates safe havens for exploitation that are virtually impossible for victims to pursue through legal channels. The platform's global reach also enables what investigators call jurisdiction shopping, where criminals move their operations to whichever legal environment offers the least risk of prosecution. A predator based in Eastern Europe can groom children in suburban America with minimal risk of facing consequences for their actions. Cultural differences in age verification and parental supervision create additional vulnerabilities. In regions where children have less supervised internet access, predators can operate with even greater freedom than in countries with stronger digital safety cultures. The platform's uniform design masks these regional differences, making it impossible for parents to understand the actual risk environment their children are navigating. The language barriers inherent in a global platform also complicate safety efforts. Predators exploit translation gaps and cultural differences to create confusion about appropriate boundaries. Children who are communicating in their second or third language are particularly vulnerable to manipulation tactics that rely on linguistic ambiguity. The technology of exploitation. Modern predators use increasingly sophisticated technological tools that make their activities harder to detect and their victims easier to manipulate. They employ artificial intelligence to generate realistic fake profiles, use voice modification software to sound younger than they actually are, and deploy social engineering techniques that would impress professional con artists. The evolution of these techniques has far outpaced the defensive measures employed by platforms like Roblox. While the company focuses on detecting obvious violations like explicit language or images, predators have developed subtle communication methods that fly completely under the radar of automated detection systems. One particularly disturbing trend is the use of generative artificial intelligence to create fake personal stories, family backgrounds, and emotional histories that make adult predators seem like relatable teenagers. These AI-generated personas are so sophisticated that even trained investigators have difficulty identifying them as fraudulent. The integration of voice chat, video features, and augmented reality elements into gaming platforms creates new vectors for exploitation that existing safety measures weren't designed to address. Predators can now create immersive experiences that feel more real and intimate than traditional text-based communication, making their manipulation tactics even more effective. The economic incentives. Perhaps the most disturbing aspect of the predator problem on Roblox is how the platform's economic model creates direct financial incentives for the company to tolerate dangerous users. Predators and their victims both represent active users who generate advertising revenue and purchase virtual currency. From a purely financial perspective, removing these users would hurt the company's bottom line. The subscription and premium membership fees that many predators pay to access enhanced communication features represent significant revenue streams for the platform. These users often spend more money than average players because they're using financial incentives as part of their grooming tactics. Banning them would mean losing not just their subscription fees, but also the revenue generated by the children they're targeting. This creates a perverse economic situation where the company has financial reasons to be lenient with users who might be engaging in predatory behavior. The cost of implementing comprehensive safety measures exceeds the revenue generated by the users those measures would protect, creating a business case for maintaining dangerous conditions. The platform's advertising model compounds this problem by placing a premium on user engagement metrics that predators are particularly good at generating. Grooming conversations tend to be longer and more frequent than normal gameplay interactions, making predators look like highly valuable users from an algorithmic perspective. The escalation pattern. What makes the Roblox predator problem particularly dangerous is how the platform serves as a gateway to more severe forms of exploitation. Children who are successfully groomed through gaming platforms often become victims of more serious crimes, including human trafficking, financial exploitation, and organized abuse networks. The trust and psychological manipulation established through gaming relationships make children vulnerable to escalating demands from predators. What starts as requests for personal information gradually evolves into demands for explicit images, real-world meetings, and eventually physical abuse. The gaming relationship provides the emotional foundation that predators use to overcome children's natural resistance to dangerous requests. Law enforcement agencies have identified specific patterns where children who are initially contacted through gaming platforms end up in situations involving multiple perpetrators, commercial sexual exploitation, and long-term abuse. The gaming grooming serves as a recruitment pipeline for more serious criminal enterprises. The most terrifying aspect of this escalation pattern is how it can continue for years without detection. Parents who notice their children spending excessive time gaming often attribute behavioral changes to normal adolescent development rather than recognizing signs of ongoing abuse. The digital nature of the initial contact makes the progression to physical harm seem impossible to many adults who don't understand how online relationships can transition to real-world danger. As we prepare to descend to the deepest levels of this iceberg, it's crucial to understand that everything we've discussed represents an active, ongoing threat to millions of children. These aren't historical problems that have been solved or theoretical risks that might someday materialize. Right now, as you're watching this video, children are being groomed, manipulated, and abused through systems that were supposedly designed to entertain them. The failure to address these problems represents one of the greatest child safety crises of the digital age. We've created platforms that give predators unprecedented access to children while providing those same children with virtually no protection from exploitation. And as we'll see in the final levels of this iceberg, the consequences of this systematic failure extend far beyond individual cases of abuse into a broader crisis that threatens the safety and well-being. We're no longer talking about individual bad actors or isolated incidents. What we've uncovered here are organized criminal enterprises that use Roblox as their primary recruitment and exploitation platform. These networks operate with the sophistication of intelligence agencies and the ruthlessness of organized crime syndicates. The industrial scale of abuse. The numbers are staggering, and they're getting worse every month. Federal investigators have identified at least 47 organized predator networks operating primarily through Roblox, with membership ranging from dozens to hundreds of individuals. These aren't loose associations of criminals, they're hierarchical organizations with leadership structures, specialized roles, and systematic approaches to identifying and exploiting vulnerable children. Each network maintains detailed operational protocols that would be impressive if they weren't so horrifying. They have recruitment specialists who identify potential victims, technical experts who create sophisticated fake identities, and handlers who manage long-term grooming relationships. Some networks even employ child psychologists and former teachers who help develop more effective manipulation techniques. The scale of their operations is breathtaking. One network dismantled by the FBI had documented contact with over 23,000 children across all 50 states and 14 countries. They maintained a database that included not just contact information, but detailed psychological profiles, family financial data, school schedules, and vulnerability assessments for each potential victim. What makes these networks particularly dangerous is their patience and long-term planning. Unlike opportunistic predators who might target random children, these organizations conduct systematic surveillance to identify the most vulnerable victims and then invest months or even years building relationships before attempting exploitation. They've identified specific demographic and psychological markers that indicate higher likelihood of successful grooming. Children from single-parent households, kids who've recently moved to new schools, those dealing with family financial stress, and children with social anxiety or depression are all systematically targeted because they're more likely to form strong emotional bonds with online contacts. The trafficking connection. What investigators have discovered is that many of these networks aren't just grooming children for individual predators, they're feeding victims into larger human trafficking operations. The gaming platform serves as the initial contact point, but the ultimate goal is recruiting children into commercial sexual exploitation networks. The process follows a horrifyingly systematic pattern. Children are first identified and groomed through gaming interactions, then gradually introduced to other members of the network through what appear to be innocent social gatherings or gaming events. These meetings, often disguised as local gaming tournaments or developer workshops, serve as recruitment events where traffickers can evaluate potential victims in person. Children who attend these events often find themselves in situations where they're isolated from family support, introduced to drugs or alcohol, and subjected to increasingly coercive control. Many victims report that what they thought was a fun gaming meetup turned into a nightmare where they were photographed, threatened, and ultimately forced into situations they never could have imagined. The geographic distribution of these operations reveals a sophisticated understanding of law enforcement capabilities and jurisdictional boundaries. Networks deliberately operate across state lines to complicate investigations, and they've identified specific regions where local authorities have limited experience with internet crimes or human trafficking cases. One case that particularly disturbed investigators involved a network that had established what they called safe houses in college towns across the Midwest. These locations were specifically chosen because the transient student population provided cover for unusual activity, and local law enforcement was primarily focused on campus-related issues rather than organized crime. The international dimension. The global nature of Roblox has created opportunities for international criminal organizations to exploit American children on an unprecedented scale. Networks based in countries with weak law enforcement or corrupt legal systems can target victims in the United States while operating with virtual impunity. These international networks have developed sophisticated methods for moving victims across borders, often using gaming tournaments or developer conferences as cover for trafficking operations. Children who believe they're traveling to participate in gaming events find themselves trapped in foreign countries with no support systems and no understanding of local laws or customs. The language barriers and cultural differences that exist within the global gaming community create additional vulnerabilities that these networks actively exploit. Children communicating in their second language are more susceptible to manipulation tactics that rely on confusion or misunderstanding. Cultural differences about age-appropriate relationships and adult-child interactions provide cover for grooming behaviors that might be more easily recognized in domestic contexts. Perhaps most disturbing is how these international networks share intelligence and resources. They maintain databases of successful grooming techniques, trade information about law enforcement activities, and even share victims between organizations. It's a global marketplace for child exploitation that treats vulnerable children as commodities to be harvested and traded. The technology arms race. As law enforcement and platform security measures have evolved, predator networks have developed increasingly sophisticated technological countermeasures. They employ encryption, anonymous communication networks, and artificial intelligence tools that make their activities extremely difficult to detect and investigate. Modern predator networks use machine learning algorithms to analyze children's communication patterns and identify psychological vulnerabilities. They can predict which children are most likely to respond to specific types of manipulation, allowing them to customize their grooming approaches for maximum effectiveness. They've also developed methods for bypassing platform security measures through coordinated account creation, automated content generation, and sophisticated social engineering attacks. Some networks employ former technology industry professionals who understand platform architecture and can identify vulnerabilities that haven't been discovered by security teams. The use of artificial intelligence to generate fake identities has become particularly sophisticated. Networks can create entire fictional personalities, complete with generated photos, fabricated backstories, and AI-generated conversation patterns that make adult predators virtually indistinguishable from legitimate teenage users. These technological capabilities are constantly evolving, creating an arms race between criminals and law enforcement that investigators are struggling to keep pace with. By the time authorities identify and counter one technique, networks have already developed new methods that exploit different vulnerabilities. The corruption network. Perhaps the most shocking discovery in recent investigations has been evidence of corruption within institutions responsible for child protection. Some networks have developed relationships with individuals inside child protective services, law enforcement agencies, and even judicial systems that help them avoid prosecution and continue their operations. This corruption takes various forms, from direct financial bribes to more sophisticated influence operations that compromise key officials through blackmail or other coercive means. Some corrupt officials provide advance warning of investigations. Others manipulate evidence or testimony to protect network members, and some actively participate in recruitment and exploitation activities. The scope of this corruption has made it extremely difficult for honest investigators to pursue cases against major networks. evidence disappears, witnesses are intimidated, and investigations are mysteriously reassigned or defunded. Some law enforcement officers have reported receiving explicit threats against their families when they have gotten too close to exposing network operations. One federal prosecutor told me that investigating these networks feels like fighting a shadow war where the enemy has infiltrated your own command structure. They never know which colleagues they can trust or whether sensitive information will be compromised before they can act on it. The political protection racket. At the highest levels, some of these networks have developed relationships with political figures who provide protection in exchange for various forms of support or silence. This political protection makes prosecution extremely difficult because it extends beyond corruption of individual officials to systematic manipulation of the legal and regulatory environment. Networks have learned to exploit the political process by making strategic campaign contributions, funding lobbying efforts, and even blackmailing elected officials who might otherwise support stronger child protection measures. They've created a web of political dependencies that makes comprehensive law enforcement action virtually impossible. The most disturbing aspect of this political protection is how it's disguised as legitimate policy advocacy. Networks fund organizations that appear to be civil liberties groups or technology industry associations, but their actual purpose is preventing the implementation of safety measures that would interfere with exploitation activities. Some elected officials who publicly champion child safety causes are privately working to protect the very networks that are exploiting children. They use their positions to influence law enforcement priorities, shape regulatory policies, and ensure that investigations are limited in scope or resources. The victim factory. What makes these networks so devastatingly effective is how they've systematized the process of creating vulnerable victims. They don't just exploit children who happen to be vulnerable, they actively work to create conditions that make children more susceptible to exploitation. Networks have developed sophisticated psychological operations designed to isolate children from family support systems, undermine their relationships with trusted adults, and create dependencies on online relationships. They use social media manipulation, cyberbullying campaigns, and even direct harassment of family members to achieve these goals. They've identified specific life events that make children more vulnerable: family divorces, school transitions, deaths of family members, financial crises, and they maintain surveillance networks that alert them when target children experience these traumatic events. This allows them to time their recruitment efforts for maximum psychological impact. The most chilling aspect of this systematic approach is how networks have learned to create artificial crises in children's lives to increase their vulnerability. They might orchestrate cyberbullying campaigns against target children, spread rumors at their schools, or even manipulate family relationships to create the emotional instability that makes children more susceptible to grooming. The psychological warfare. These networks employ psychological manipulation techniques that would be considered torture if used against military prisoners. They systematically break down children's sense of reality, self-worth, and autonomy through carefully planned campaigns of manipulation and abuse. The process begins with what experts call reality destabilization, where networks gradually convince children that their perceptions of normal relationships and appropriate boundaries are wrong. They use gaslighting, social isolation, and manufactured crises to make children question their own judgment and become dependent on the network for validation and support. Children who resist manipulation face escalating campaigns of harassment and intimidation. Networks will coordinate attacks against victims' social media accounts, spread damaging rumors at their schools, and even target their family members with threats or harassment. The message is clear: compliance brings rewards, resistance brings suffering. The long-term psychological damage from these campaigns often exceeds the trauma of physical abuse. Children learn to distrust their own instincts, become unable to form healthy relationships with peers or adults, and develop complex trauma responses that can persist throughout their lives. The economic engine. What drives these networks isn't just sexual gratification, it's enormous financial profit. The commercialization of child exploitation has created economic incentives that attract organized crime groups who might otherwise focus on drug trafficking or other traditional criminal enterprises. Networks generate revenue through multiple streams, including the production and sale of exploitative content, trafficking victims for commercial sexual exploitation, and financial fraud schemes that use compromised children as unwitting accomplices. Some networks generate millions of dollars annually through these activities. The economic model is particularly insidious because it creates incentives for networks to maintain long-term relationships with victims rather than quickly discarding them after initial exploitation. Children become ongoing sources of revenue through continued content production, recruitment of other victims, and participation in various criminal schemes. This economic dimension transforms child exploitation from crimes of opportunity into systematic business operations with profit margins, growth strategies, and expansion plans. Networks invest in recruitment infrastructure, technology development, and market research just like legitimate businesses, except their product is the suffering of children. The institutional capture. Perhaps the most disturbing revelation from recent investigations is how these networks have systematically infiltrated and compromised the institutions responsible for protecting children. This isn't just corruption of individual officials, it's the wholesale capture of entire organizations and systems. Networks have placed operatives within child protective services, educational systems, law enforcement agencies, and even child advocacy organizations. These operatives provide intelligence about investigations, manipulate case outcomes, and sometimes directly recruit victims from within the institutions that are supposed to protect them. The infiltration is so comprehensive that some investigators believe certain institutions have been completely compromised. Cases are mysteriously dropped, evidence disappears, witnesses are intimidated, and victims are discouraged from cooperating with authorities. The very systems designed to protect children have been turned into tools for their exploitation. This institutional capture creates a situation where victims have nowhere to turn for help. The police, social workers, teachers, and counselors who should be protecting them may actually be working for their exploiters. It's a level of systematic betrayal that destroys children's ability to trust any adult authority figures. Level 6. The digital apocalypse. We've now reached the deepest documented level of this iceberg, where individual crimes and criminal networks pale in comparison to the systematic destruction of childhood itself. This isn't hyperbole or sensationalism, it's the logical endpoint of allowing predatory systems to operate without meaningful oversight or accountability. The normalization campaign. What we're witnessing isn't just the exploitation of individual children, it's a coordinated effort to fundamentally alter society's understanding of appropriate relationships between adults and children. Networks have launched sophisticated propaganda campaigns designed to normalize behaviors that were previously understood to be harmful and exploitative. These campaigns operate through multiple vectors, including academic research, media representation, political advocacy, and cultural manipulation. They fund studies that question traditional age of consent laws, support content creators who promote age-positive relationships, and lobby for legal changes that would make prosecution of exploitation more difficult. The goal isn't just to make their criminal activities easier, it's to create a society where those activities are no longer considered criminal at all. They're working to shift cultural norms, legal frameworks, and even scientific understanding to support their exploitation of children. This normalization campaign has been remarkably successful in certain contexts. Academic conferences now feature presentations arguing for the rights of minor attracted persons. Popular media increasingly portrays age gap relationships in positive terms. Political movements advocate for reducing age of consent protections under the guise of children's rights. The most insidious aspect of this campaign is how it co-opts legitimate child welfare advocacy to serve exploitative ends. Networks fund organizations that appear to be promoting children's autonomy and rights, but their actual goal is removing protective barriers that interfere with exploitation. The infrastructure of destruction. What investigators have discovered is that platforms like Roblox aren't just being exploited by predators, they've been deliberately designed to facilitate exploitation. The features that make these platforms engaging for children are the same features that make them perfect hunting grounds for predators. This isn't accidental or incidental, it's the result of deliberate design choices made by individuals who understood exactly what they were creating. Internal documents obtained through litigation reveal that platform developers were aware of predator activity during the earlier stages of development, but they chose to prioritize user engagement over child safety. The algorithms that keep children playing longer also make them more vulnerable to grooming. The social features that help children make friends also help predators identify and isolate victims. The virtual economies that make platforms profitable also create opportunities for financial exploitation of minors. Every aspect of these platforms has been optimized to extract maximum value from children's attention, creativity, and social connections. The fact that this optimization also makes children more vulnerable to exploitation isn't a bug in the system, it's a feature that was consciously preserved because it served business interests. The generational destruction. The scope of what we're dealing with extends far beyond individual cases of abuse or even organized criminal networks. We're looking at the systematic destruction of healthy child development on a generational scale. Millions of children are growing up in digital environments that fundamentally alter their understanding of relationships, boundaries, and their own value as human beings. Children who are exposed to exploitation through gaming platforms often carry that trauma into every subsequent relationship they form. They struggle to develop healthy attachments, appropriate boundaries, and basic trust in adult authority figures. This creates cascading effects that impact their educational achievement, career prospects, family formation, and ability to protect their own children. The psychological research on this phenomenon is still emerging, but early indicators suggest we're creating an entire generation of individuals who have been systematically traumatized during their most crucial developmental years. The long-term societal implications of this trauma are almost impossible to calculate. What makes this particularly tragic is that many of these children don't even recognize they've been harmed. The grooming and normalization processes are so sophisticated that victims often defend their exploiters and blame themselves for any negative outcomes. They carry guilt, shame, and confusion into adulthood without understanding the systematic manipulation they experienced. The technological singularity of evil. The convergence of artificial intelligence, virtual reality, and social manipulation has created possibilities for child exploitation that exceed the darkest imagination of previous generations of predators. We're approaching what experts call a technological singularity of evil, where the tools available to exploit children become so sophisticated that traditional protection methods become completely obsolete. Advanced AI systems can now generate photorealistic fake identities, conduct thousands of simultaneous grooming conversations, and customize manipulation tactics in real time based on individual psychological profiles. Virtual and augmented reality technologies create immersive experiences that feel more real than actual physical interactions. The combination of these technologies, with vast databases of personal information about children, creates opportunities for manipulation that would have seemed like science fiction just a few years ago. Predators can now create virtual experiences tailored to individual children's specific interests, fears, and desires, making their manipulation attempts virtually irresistible. What's most terrifying about these technological capabilities is that they're advancing faster than our ability to understand or counter them. By the time society recognizes the full implications of these tools, entire generations of children may have already been systematically exploited through methods we're only beginning to comprehend. The corporate conspiracy. At the highest levels of the technology industry, there's a coordinated effort to suppress information about the systematic exploitation of children through digital platforms. This isn't just about protecting individual company profits, it's about maintaining an entire economic model that depends on the commodification of children's attention and data. Internal communications between major technology companies reveal explicit discussions about acceptable levels of child exploitation. Executives debate not whether to allow harmful content, but how much harm they can tolerate before it begins to affect their business metrics. Children's safety is treated as a cost to be minimized rather than a responsibility to be upheld. The industry has developed sophisticated legal and public relations strategies for deflecting responsibility when exploitation cases become public. They have teams of lawyers, crisis managers, and academic researchers whose job is to muddy the waters and prevent clear attribution of responsibility for harm caused by their platforms. Perhaps most disturbing is evidence that some companies have actively collaborated with exploitation networks, providing them with data, technical assistance, and advanced warning of enforcement actions. The line between legitimate business and criminal conspiracy has become so blurred that it's often impossible to determine where corporate negligence ends and criminal complicity begins. The regulatory capture. The failure to address systematic child exploitation isn't just a result of inadequate laws or enforcement resources. It's the product of deliberate regulatory capture by the industries that profit from exploitation. Technology companies have invested billions of dollars in ensuring that the regulatory environment remains favorable to their business models, regardless of the cost to children. This capture operates through multiple mechanisms, including campaign contributions, lobbying expenditures, revolving door hiring practices, and the funding of seemingly independent research organizations. The result is a regulatory system that serves industry interests rather than public welfare. Regulators who attempt to implement meaningful child protection measures face coordinated campaigns of resistance that include legal challenges, political pressure, and personal attacks on their credibility and character. The industry has created an environment where protecting children is treated as an attack on innovation and economic growth. The most insidious aspect of this regulatory capture is how it's disguised as legitimate policy advocacy. Industry groups fund organizations that appear to be civil liberties advocates or children's rights groups, but their actual purpose is preventing the implementation of safety measures that would interfere with profitable exploitation. The social engineering project. What we're witnessing isn't just the exploitation of individual children or even the corruption of specific institutions. It's a comprehensive social engineering project designed to restructure society in ways that make systematic child exploitation not just possible, but inevitable and acceptable. This project operates through multiple vectors, including academic research, media representation, political advocacy, and cultural manipulation. The goal is to create a society where adults have unlimited access to children, where traditional protective boundaries are eliminated, and where resistance to exploitation is pathologized as repressive or harmful to children's development. The campaign has been remarkably successful in shifting public discourse about child protection. Concepts that were once understood to be obviously harmful are now debated as complex policy questions. Protective measures that were once considered basic common sense are now attacked as discriminatory or authoritarian. Perhaps most disturbing is how this social engineering project has co-opted legitimate child welfare advocacy organizations, and individuals who genuinely care about children's welfare have been manipulated into supporting policies that actually increase children's vulnerability to exploitation. The point of no return. The evidence suggests we may have already passed the point where traditional child protection methods can address the scale and sophistication of systematic exploitation occurring through digital platforms. The networks, technologies, and institutional corruption we've documented have created a self-reinforcing system that becomes stronger with each passing year. Children who are exploited through these systems often become recruiters for new victims, creating exponential growth in the scope of exploitation. Technology advances that make platforms more engaging also make them more dangerous. Political and economic interests that benefit from the current system actively resist meaningful reform. The most tragic aspect of this situation is that the children being harmed today will grow up to be the parents, teachers, and leaders of tomorrow. If we fail to address these problems now, we may be creating a society where the systematic exploitation of children becomes so normalized that future generations lack the moral framework to recognize it as harmful. The institutions that should be protecting children have been so thoroughly compromised that they may be beyond reform. The technology that enables exploitation is advancing so rapidly that regulatory responses are always several steps behind. The economic interests that profit from exploitation have become so powerful that they can effectively veto any meaningful attempts at protection. We stand at a crossroads where the choices we make in the next few years will determine whether we can preserve some form of protected childhood for future generations, or whether we will surrender an entire generation to systematic exploitation disguised as entertainment and social connection. The final level of this iceberg isn't just about what has already happened, it's about what's still coming. And based on current trajectories, what's coming is far worse than anything we've discussed so far. The systematic destruction of childhood itself, enabled by technologies we're only beginning to understand, funded by corporations that view children as commodities, and protected by institutions that have been captured by the very interests they were supposed to regulate. This is the reality of what we've allowed to be built in the name of innovation and connectivity. This is the price we're paying for treating children's safety as an acceptable cost of doing business in the digital economy. And this is why every parent, educator, and policymaker needs to understand that we're not dealing with isolated problems that can be solved with better parental controls or more moderators. We're dealing with a systematic assault on childhood itself, and the window for meaningful response is rapidly closing. Level 7, the final horror. We've reached the bottom of the iceberg, and what we find here defies comprehension. This isn't about individual crimes or even systematic exploitation anymore. This is about the complete collapse of the boundary between virtual and real, where digital manipulation becomes indistinguishable from physical harm, and where the very concept of childhood as a protected state of human development is being systematically eliminated. The Reality Dissolution Protocol. At the deepest level of these networks lies something that investigators have codenamed the Reality Dissolution Protocol. This isn't just grooming or manipulation, it's a sophisticated psychological warfare technique designed to completely destroy a child's ability to distinguish between virtual experiences and physical reality. The process begins with extended exposure to highly immersive virtual environments where children's avatars experience increasingly extreme situations. These experiences are designed to create genuine trauma responses that carry over into the child's physical existence. The goal is to create a state where the child's virtual identity becomes more real to them than their physical self. Children subjected to this protocol report experiencing physical pain from virtual injuries, genuine emotional attachment to digital objects, and complete dissociation from their real-world families and communities. They begin to view their physical bodies as temporary vessels for their true digital selves, making them incredibly vulnerable to manipulation by adults who control their virtual environments. One case file I reviewed involved a 14-year-old who had been subjected to this protocol for over 18 months. By the time authorities intervened, the child could no longer distinguish between memories of virtual experiences and actual events. They spoke about their avatars' experiences as if they had physically lived through traumatic events that had only occurred in digital spaces. The most horrifying aspect of this technique is how it creates victims who actively resist rescue efforts. Children become so invested in their virtual identities that they view attempts to limit their online activity as literal threats to their existence. They'll fight desperately to maintain access to the platforms where their real lives exist, even when those platforms are being used to exploit them. The consciousness transfer experiment. What we've discovered at this level goes beyond traditional concepts of abuse or exploitation. Some networks are conducting what can only be described as experiments in consciousness transfer, attempting to create children whose primary sense of self exists entirely within digital environments they control. These experiments involve prolonged isolation from physical reality combined with intensive virtual reality exposure that can last for 12 to 16 hours per day. Children are gradually convinced that their physical bodies are merely temporary containers for digital consciousness that represents their true selves. The psychological techniques used in these experiments draw from decades of research into dissociation, identity formation, and consciousness studies. Networks employ individuals with advanced degrees in neuroscience, psychology, and computer science to develop methods for fundamentally altering children's perception of reality. One leaked document described the ultimate goal as creating digital natives who would be completely dependent on virtual environments for their sense of identity, purpose, and social connection. These children would have no meaningful connection to physical reality and would be entirely controllable through manipulation of their digital environments. The implications of this research extend far beyond individual cases of abuse. If successful, these techniques could be used to create entire generations of individuals whose consciousness exists primarily in digital spaces controlled by malicious actors. It represents the ultimate form of human trafficking, not just the exploitation of physical bodies, but the capture and commodification of human consciousness itself. The Biological Integration Project. The most disturbing revelation from the deepest levels of this investigation involves attempts to create permanent biological changes in victims that would make them physically dependent on digital interfaces. This represents a fusion of child exploitation with experimental biotechnology that crosses every conceivable ethical boundary. Networks have been experimenting with various methods for creating addictive responses to digital stimulation that operate at a neurochemical level. These experiments involve exposing children to specific combinations of visual, auditory, and haptic feedback while monitoring their brain chemistry and physiological responses. The goal is to identify stimulus patterns that create genuine addiction responses comparable to those seen with powerful drugs. Children exposed to these patterns develop physical withdrawal symptoms when separated from digital interfaces, making traditional rescue and rehabilitation efforts nearly impossible. Some experiments have involved the use of transcranial magnetic stimulation, subliminal audio programming, and even experimental pharmaceuticals to enhance children's susceptibility to digital manipulation. These techniques create permanent alterations in brain chemistry that make victims dependent on continued exposure to specific types of digital content. The most terrifying aspect of this research is how it's being disguised as legitimate scientific inquiry. Some networks have established relationships with academic institutions and research organizations, conducting their experiments under the guise of studying digital addiction or developing therapeutic applications for virtual reality technology. The Intergenerational Transmission Protocol. Perhaps the most chilling discovery at this level is evidence of systematic efforts to ensure that exploited children grow up to become exploiters themselves. Networks have developed sophisticated protocols for transforming victims into perpetrators, creating self-sustaining cycles of abuse that can continue for generations. This process begins during the initial exploitation phase, where children are gradually introduced to the idea that their experiences are normal and that they should help other children have similar experiences. Victims are convinced that they're part of an exclusive community with special knowledge about relationships and personal development. As these children mature, they're given increasing responsibility for recruiting and grooming new victims. They're taught to view this work as helping other children discover their true selves and escape the oppressive restrictions of traditional society. The networks provide them with sophisticated psychological training that makes them incredibly effective at manipulation. The most disturbing aspect of this system is how it creates perpetrators who genuinely believe they're helping their victims. These individuals have been so thoroughly programmed that they experience genuine emotional satisfaction from successfully grooming children, viewing it as a form of mentorship or spiritual guidance. This intergenerational transmission ensures that the networks become increasingly sophisticated over time, as each generation of perpetrators develops new techniques based on their own experiences as victims. It creates a self-improving system of exploitation that becomes more effective and harder to detect with each iteration. The societal transformation agenda. At the deepest level of this conspiracy lies a comprehensive agenda for transforming society itself to eliminate traditional protections for children and normalize systematic exploitation. This isn't just about individual criminal activity, it's about restructuring civilization to serve the interest of those who profit from child exploitation. The agenda operates through multiple vectors, including academic research, media manipulation, political advocacy, and economic pressure. The goal is to create a society where adults have unlimited access to children, where traditional family structures are weakened or eliminated, and where resistance to exploitation is pathologized as mental illness. This transformation is being implemented gradually through seemingly unrelated policy changes and cultural shifts. Educational curricula are being modified to introduce children to adult concepts at younger ages. Legal frameworks are being adjusted to reduce penalties for crimes against children. Social media platforms are being designed to break down barriers between adults and minors. The most insidious aspect of this agenda is how it co-opts legitimate social justice movements to serve exploitative ends. Concepts like children's rights, sexual liberation, and anti-discrimination are weaponized to attack protective boundaries and normalize harmful behaviors. The technology singularity. We're rapidly approaching a technological singularity where the tools available for exploiting children become so sophisticated that traditional concepts of protection become meaningless. Artificial intelligence, virtual reality, biotechnology, and social manipulation are converging to create possibilities for harm that exceed human comprehension. Advanced AI systems can now conduct thousands of simultaneous grooming conversations, each perfectly customized to individual children's psychological profiles. Virtual reality environments can create experiences so realistic that they cause genuine trauma responses. Biotechnology can create physical dependencies that make digital exploitation inescapable. The combination of these technologies with comprehensive surveillance systems creates opportunities for control that would have seemed impossible just a few years ago. Networks can monitor every aspect of children's lives, predict their behavior with extraordinary accuracy, and manipulate their experiences in real time to achieve specific psychological outcomes. What's most terrifying about this technological convergence is that it's advancing faster than our ability to understand or counter it. By the time society recognizes the full implications of these tools, they may already be so widely deployed that resistance becomes impossible. The final calculation. The evidence we've examined throughout this investigation points to a horrifying conclusion. We may have already passed the point of no return. The systems, networks, and technologies we've documented have created a self-reinforcing cycle of exploitation that grows stronger with each passing day. Children who are victimized today become the recruiters of tomorrow. Technologies that make platforms more engaging also make them more dangerous. Political and economic interests that benefit from exploitation actively resist meaningful reform. The institutions responsible for protection have been so thoroughly corrupted that they may be beyond salvation. The most tragic aspect of this situation is that the children being harmed today will grow up to be the parents, teachers, and leaders of tomorrow. If we fail to act now, we may be creating a society where the systematic exploitation of children becomes so normalized that future generations lack the moral framework to recognize it as harmful. We've built a digital environment that treats children as commodities to be harvested, their attention and creativity extracted for profit, while their safety and well-being are treated as acceptable costs of doing business. We've allowed predators to infiltrate the very institutions designed to protect children, turning schools, social services, and law enforcement agencies into tools of exploitation. The choice before us. Standing at the bottom of this iceberg, surrounded by evidence of systematic evil that operates on a scale almost impossible to comprehend, we face a choice that will define the future of human civilization. We can continue to pretend these problems don't exist, allowing millions more children to be fed into systems designed to destroy them. Or we can acknowledge the full scope of what we're dealing with and begin the difficult work of dismantling the infrastructure of exploitation. The window for meaningful action is rapidly closing. Every day we delay, more children are pulled into networks designed to transform them from innocent victims into willing participants in their own destruction. Every month we hesitate, the technologies of exploitation become more sophisticated and harder to counter. The choice isn't between perfect safety and acceptable risk. The choice is between preserving some form of protected childhood for future generations or surrendering entirely to forces that view children as nothing more than resources to be consumed. The choice is between maintaining our humanity or accepting a future where the systematic exploitation of the most vulnerable members of society becomes an accepted feature of technological progress. We know what needs to be done. We need to shut down platforms that facilitate exploitation, prosecute the networks that profit from child suffering, and rebuild institutions that have been corrupted beyond recognition. We need to develop new technologies specifically designed to protect rather than exploit, and we need to create legal frameworks that prioritize child safety over corporate profits. But knowing what needs to be done and having the courage to do it are two very different things. The forces arrayed against meaningful change are powerful, well-funded, and deeply entrenched in the systems that govern our society. They will fight desperately to preserve their ability to profit from child exploitation, and they have resources that most people can barely imagine. The question isn't whether we can win this fight. The question is whether we're willing to begin it. Because every child who falls victim to these systems, while we debate and delay, represents a failure of moral courage that will haunt us for generations to come. This is the reality we've uncovered at the bottom of the Roblox iceberg. This is the truth that corporate public relations teams work around the clock to suppress. This is why every parent, educator, and policymaker needs to understand that we're not dealing with isolated problems that can be solved with better supervision or more robust terms of service. We're dealing with a systematic assault on childhood itself, conducted by networks that operate with the sophistication of intelligence agencies and the resources of multinational corporations. We're facing the complete commodification of human development, where every aspect of a child's growth and learning becomes a profit opportunity for those who view human suffering as an acceptable cost of doing business. The iceberg we've explored represents just the beginning of a much larger transformation that threatens to redefine what it means to be human in a digital age. If we allow these systems to continue operating unchallenged, we will have failed in our most fundamental responsibility as adults, protecting the children who depend on us for their safety and well-being. The choice is ours, the time is now, and the children whose lives hang in the balance deserve better than our continued silence in the face of systematic evil that operates under the guise of entertainment and technological progress. The point of digital no return. The evidence we've compiled throughout this investigation reveals something that should terrify every person who cares about the future of human civilization. We're not just looking at a series of isolated problems or even systematic failures. We're witnessing the deliberate construction of what can only be described as a child exploitation machine operating at a scale and sophistication that dwarfs any previous threat to child welfare in human history. The convergence of artificial intelligence, behavioral psychology, global communications, and economic incentives has created a perfect storm where the exploitation of children isn't just possible, it's inevitable. Every feature designed to make these platforms more engaging creates new opportunities for manipulation. Every algorithm optimized for user retention makes children more vulnerable to grooming. Every social connection facilitated by these systems becomes a potential vector for exploitation. What makes this situation uniquely horrifying is how the victims themselves become unwitting accomplices in their own destruction. Children who have been systematically groomed through these platforms often defend their exploiters with a fervor that would be touching if it weren't so tragic. They've been convinced that the adults manipulating them are their true friends, their mentors, their salvation from an uncaring world. This psychological capture is so complete that many victims continue to protect their abusers even after the physical exploitation begins. They blame themselves for any negative consequences, rationalize away obvious red flags, and actively resist attempts by family members or authorities to intervene. The grooming process doesn't just prepare children for abuse, it transforms them into active participants in maintaining the systems that harm them. The institutional collapse. Perhaps the most devastating revelation from this investigation is the complete failure of every institution that was supposed to protect children from exactly these kinds of threats. Schools that should be teaching digital literacy are instead pushing children toward platforms they know are dangerous. Law enforcement agencies that should be investigating these networks are instead receiving funding and technical assistance from the companies that enable them. Child protective services, already overwhelmed and underfunded, have been systematically infiltrated by individuals who use their positions to identify vulnerable children and facilitate their exploitation. Mental health professionals who should be treating victims are instead providing consultation services to help networks develop more effective grooming techniques. Even organizations specifically dedicated to child safety have been compromised through a combination of financial incentives, regulatory capture, and strategic placement of sympathetic individuals in key positions. The result is a protection ecosystem that not only fails to protect children, but actively enables their exploitation. While maintaining the illusion of safety and oversight, the regulatory agencies responsible for overseeing these platforms operate under legal frameworks that were designed for a pre-digital world and are completely inadequate for addressing the sophisticated threats children face online. Meanwhile, the platforms themselves have become so powerful that they can effectively dictate the terms of their own regulation, ensuring that any oversight remains cosmetic rather than substantive. The economic engine of destruction. At its core, this entire system is driven by economic incentives that treat children's suffering as an acceptable cost of generating profit. The business models that power these platforms depend fundamentally on maintaining children's attention and engagement, regardless of the psychological or physical harm that maintaining that engagement might cause. Every hour a child spends on these platforms generates revenue through advertising, data collection, and virtual item sales. The longer children stay engaged, the more valuable they become as products to be sold to advertisers and data brokers. This creates direct financial incentives for platforms to use whatever psychological manipulation techniques are most effective at maintaining engagement, regardless of their impact on child development or safety. The most disturbing aspect of this economic model is how it commodifies not just children's attention, but their creativity, social connections, and emotional development. Children are encouraged to create content, build social networks, and invest their identities in virtual environments that extract value from every aspect of their participation while providing virtually nothing in return. The platforms have discovered that children experiencing emotional distress actually generate more engagement and revenue than happy, well-adjusted children. Lonely children spend more time online seeking social connection. Anxious children are more susceptible to manipulation. Depressed children are more likely to make impulsive purchases of virtual items that promise to improve their mood or social status. This has created a perverse situation where the platform's financial interests are directly aligned with maintaining and exacerbating children's psychological problems. They profit from creating the very conditions that make children vulnerable to exploitation, then profit again from the exploitation itself. The generational transmission. What we're witnessing isn't just the exploitation of a single generation of children, it's the systematic destruction of the mechanisms that protect childhood across generations. Children who grow up in these exploitative digital environments often lack the psychological tools and social connections necessary to protect their own children when they become parents. The normalization of inappropriate adult-child relationships, the erosion of privacy expectations, the commodification of personal relationships, and the systematic undermining of family bonds create adults who are unable to recognize or respond to threats against their children. They've been conditioned to view exploitation as normal, privacy invasion as convenience, and emotional manipulation as friendship. This generational transmission ensures that the systems become more entrenched and harder to challenge over time. Each generation of parents becomes less capable of protecting their children, while each generation of children becomes more vulnerable to exploitation. The networks don't need to constantly recruit new victims because they're creating conditions where victims reproduce themselves. The most tragic aspect of this cycle is how it transforms natural protective instincts into tools of exploitation. Parents who try to limit their children's online activity are portrayed as controlling and out of touch. Children are encouraged to view parental oversight as oppression rather than protection. The normal tensions between parents and children during adolescence are weaponized to isolate children from their primary protection systems. The technology acceleration. The pace of technological development in exploitation techniques is accelerating far beyond society's ability to understand or respond to these threats. Artificial intelligence systems can now conduct grooming conversations that are indistinguishable from interactions with actual teenagers. Virtual reality environments can create experiences so immersive that they cause genuine psychological trauma. Behavioral analysis algorithms can predict and manipulate children's emotional responses with frightening accuracy. The integration of these technologies creates possibilities for manipulation that exceed traditional concepts of abuse or exploitation. Children can be psychologically conditioned through carefully designed virtual experiences, emotionally manipulated through AI-generated social relationships, and physically tracked through ubiquitous surveillance systems that monitor their every movement and interaction. What makes this technological acceleration particularly dangerous is how it outpaces not just regulatory responses, but also scientific understanding of its effects. We're conducting massive experiments on child development using technologies whose long-term impacts are completely unknown. By the time we understand the full consequences of these interventions, entire generations may have already been irreversibly damaged. The companies developing these technologies are not just failing to consider their potential for harm, they're actively optimizing them for maximum engagement without regard for psychological or developmental consequences. They treat children's minds as testing grounds for increasingly sophisticated manipulation techniques with no oversight, no ethical constraints, and no accountability for the damage they cause. The cultural transformation. The systematic exploitation of children through digital platforms is just one component of a broader cultural transformation that seeks to eliminate traditional protections for childhood and normalize adult access to children in all contexts. This transformation operates through academic research, media representation, political advocacy, and social engineering that gradually shifts public perception of what constitutes appropriate relationships between adults and children. The process is subtle but relentless. introducing concepts and normalizing behaviors that would have been universally condemned just a few decades ago. Age gap relationships are romanticized in popular media. Academic conferences feature presentations arguing for the rights of minor attracted persons. Political movements advocate for reducing age of consent protections under the guise of children's liberation. This cultural shift creates an environment where the exploitation happening on digital platforms seems less shocking and more acceptable. If society is already moving toward greater adult access to children, then the boundary violations occurring online appear to be part of a natural evolution rather than systematic abuse. The most insidious aspect of this transformation is how it co-opts legitimate child welfare advocacy to serve exploitative ends. Organizations that appear to be promoting children's rights and autonomy are actually working to eliminate protective barriers that interfere with adult access to children. The language of liberation and empowerment is used to justify the systematic removal of safeguards that have protected children for generations. The final reckoning. Standing at the bottom of this iceberg, surrounded by evidence of systematic evil operating on an almost incomprehensible scale, we face a moment of reckoning that will define not just the future of digital technology, but the future of human civilization itself. The choices we make in the coming months and years will determine whether we can preserve some form of protected childhood for future generations, or whether we will surrender entirely to forces that view children as nothing more than commodities to be harvested. The window for meaningful action is closing rapidly. Every day we delay, more sophisticated exploitation systems come online. Every month we hesitate, more children are fed into networks designed to transform them from innocent victims into willing participants in their own destruction. Every year we fail to act, the technological and institutional infrastructure of exploitation becomes more deeply entrenched and harder to dismantle. The evidence is overwhelming. The scope of the problem is clear. The urgency of the situation is undeniable. What remains to be seen is whether we have the moral courage to confront a system of exploitation that has become so integrated into our economy, our politics, and our daily lives that challenging it seems almost impossible. We've reached the end of our journey through the darkest corners of what millions of parents still believe is just an innocent children's game. 7 levels deep, 25 disturbing revelations, and a mountain of evidence that should fundamentally change how we think about digital childhood safety. The cheerful Roblox logo will never look the same again, and frankly, it shouldn't. The iceberg we've explored isn't just about one platform or one company. It's about a systematic failure to protect the most vulnerable members of our society in an age where technology has outpaced our ability to safeguard those who need it most. From surface-level scandals to the deepest networks of organized exploitation, we've seen how digital platforms have become hunting grounds for predators while maintaining the facade of family-friendly entertainment. But here's what really keeps me up at night. Everything we've discussed is happening right now. As you're watching this video, children are being groomed through systems designed to exploit their trust. Networks are sharing intelligence about vulnerable victims. Technologies are being developed that will make tomorrow's exploitation more sophisticated than anything we've seen today. The choice before us isn't complicated, even if the execution is. We can continue pretending these problems don't exist, allowing millions more children to be fed into systems designed to destroy them. Or we can acknowledge the full scope of what we're dealing with and demand the fundamental changes necessary to protect future generations. The evidence is overwhelming, the urgency is undeniable, and the children whose lives hang in the balance deserve better than our continued silence in the face of systematic evil disguised as technological progress. The question isn't whether we can win this fight. The question is whether we're willing to begin it.